Hello and welcome to the Leading Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Dubose. Here in the Leading Lounge, we talk with today's leaders and unpack lessons learned and being learned from a career of leading and communicating in their field. These conversations are designed to be both informal and informative, and we want to equip you with wisdom and tools to empower you as a leader where you are and where you want to be. Hey everybody, it's August and school is just about to start, and so for today's episode, I wanted to bring you Dr. Dena Counts. Dr. Dena Counts has been at Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas for a number of years, got an undergraduate degree in communication and a graduate degree in communication from ACU, and then went on to get her doctorate of education in organizational leadership from ACU. But she's an expert in communication and leadership, so she was a perfect interview for this podcast. She serves currently as the program director for the Bachelor's of Science in Organizational Leadership degree at ACU, as well as the program director for the Bachelor's of Science in Applied Communication. And most recently, she's now the assistant dean for the College of Graduate and Professional Studies at ACU Online. I happen to work for Dr. Counts as one of her adjuncts there at Abilene Christian, so I know personally what a thoughtful person she is, what an excellent communicator she is, and how much she cares about other people. The thing that was most interesting in this interview was that Dr. Counts has been through both traditional and virtual learning environments as both a student and a professor, and now she leads other adjuncts like myself in this kind of virtual world where communication can often be difficult, more opportunities for misunderstanding and those kinds of things. And so she really opens up about the importance of relationships in your communication, the intentionality aspect of it, which is really important. So if you or somebody who knows in higher education or is looking for just some pointers from someone who's been doing it a long time, is very good at it, and as an expert in the field, then listen to Dr. Counts. She's got a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight. Enjoy this interview. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leading Lounge. Got a special guest today, Dr. Dena Counts. Dena, thank you for giving me some of your time and joining me and sharing some insight and wisdom about who you are and what you do.
Of course. Glad to be here.
So typically, Dena, we'll just jump right into it. And so the first question that I ask everybody, because it lets us get to know you and let you kind of verbally unpack a little bit before we get into more pointed questions, is can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey that got you to where you are today at ACU?
Sure. You know what? Back in, I guess it was like the late 1990s, that dates me there. I was trying to figure out how in the world I could stay home with my girls, because I was already a stay-at-home mom, but how I could stay home and be home when they were out of school. And I was like, you know what? I'd love to teach community college. So I got my master's degree and started adjuncting for community colleges, got a full-time position. And we were in South Bend, Indiana at the time, and I really liked it, really liked teaching. And I hate to admit this, but I really liked teaching because I could stand at the front of the room and I could crack jokes and people would laugh, you know? So I did that. And then we were coming back to Texas, and my husband was in youth ministry, transitioned into teaching, and we decided that he could probably get a teaching job pretty much anywhere. So where could I find a job? Mm-hmm. And we interviewed in different places in Texas, but ACU is where both of us had gotten our undergraduate degrees. And we went to ACU, had an opening for a debate coach, and I had done speech and debate in college. So I took that job, was blessed to get offered that job, took that job. Now, remember, at this point, I'm out of community colleges because I'm like, I really just wanted to teach at community colleges, but good fit for my family. Abilene's a great place for my kids to be raised. Mm-hmm. And so I did debate coach. I was coaching debate for 8 years. And then I transitioned out of that because it's really stressful. Coaching debate is so stinking stressful. You know, because the great debaters are really competitive and really dominant.
Well, I was going to ask what makes it competitive. I don't know anything about debate teams.
Oh, okay. Well, in the U.S., there are different types of debate that you can compete in at the high school level and at the collegiate level. And in college, There's national parliamentary debate. There is other types of debate. A lot of the big schools like Baylor or whether it's Harvard, they will do more of a, well, very research-based debate. And most times the small schools can't keep up with the amount of research they can do because they have a lot more people, a lot more money. And we did national parliamentary debate, which is similar. It still uses research, it still uses references, and it's really fast. But the people who are, I mean, I'm talking like this. So today I want to tell you about what the U.S. is doing, and maybe do that. Anyway, so you want kids who are really competitive, who will do all that work, but also are pretty dominant and argumentative.
Hmm.
And that is a great character trait for debaters, but it's really hard to manage when you have several people like that on the team.
Okay.
So it was real stressful, and I was traveling once a month, and so that was kind of hard on my family. And so I stopped doing that and started just being a professor at ACU of communication. And then about 2015, ACU started offering free doctorates and educate on organizational leadership.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, my boss had come to me about getting a doctorate, and I was like, "Yeah, no, you know how much debt I would have to go into for that, and I would be paying it off until I retired. I'm just too old." But by the time it was free, I couldn't say no anymore, and
Yeah.
that was always kind of a long-term goal of mine. I just never thought I could afford it, so went and got that. And I had always loved teaching online. And one of the reasons probably that I didn't want my doctorate is I was not sure. I really doubted myself that I could do the research needed to get
Yeah.
the
I
doctorate.
did too.
Yeah, I just really doubted myself, but was successful, did it. And then ACU Online opened up and they were opening a communication degree. And that's what my master's in. Now my doctorate is in this organizational leadership. So funny enough, they were opening a communication and a leadership undergraduate degree. And I was like, well, yeah, I could do that. And we could live anywhere. We could live on the beach, in
Hmm.
Bermuda if we wanted to, or Puerto Rico. Now we still live in Abilene,
Yeah.
but
It's kind of like the beach.
yeah, kind of somewhere on Abilene. But so for the last 3 years, I've been working at ACU Online. I'm program director of communication and leadership degrees that are both BSs, Bachelor of Science degrees. And then about 2 years ago, I added to my job description because I have plenty of time on my hands, the assistant dean. So I'm also assistant dean of our college as well. So that's the short version of
Okay.
my professional journey.
So did you grow up in Abilene? Like your undergrad was from ACU. How'd you get connected?
You know what? I grew up in a little place called Mertzon, Texas. It's out in West Texas, about 30 minutes southwest or maybe just directly west of San Angelo. My parents had gone to ACU, and it was funny when I was graduating from high school. I was like, man, I don't know where I want to go. My parents were like, well, you could go here, and I'm like, that's a good place. It's 2 hours away from home, so I don't see you every day, my family, which was a really stuck up thing to say, but it's close enough that I can go home a lot. And Jim went to ACU as well. My husband, he grew up in Arlington, Texas, and we met there. We were best friends for 6 years, never dated. And then after 6 years, we ended up kind of waking up and going, wait a minute, you're cute, and got married. But so it was just kind of, why not go there? And I just had such a good experience. I kept coming back.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know I told you when I first interviewed with you, but my grandfather went to ACU from growing up on a ranch in South Central Texas, and so that was how my
Yeah.
family got connected. And so anyway,
Yeah.
small world.
It
When you
is.
went back for your doctorate, did you do it in person at ACU or did you do that online?
I did it online. What happened is that ATU Online started, and they started, that was back in about 2015, and they started an EDD. They had some other master's levels degrees, but they decided to start that EDD online. And for a benefit for any worker at ACU or any employee, they offer free online degrees. Now you can only get two, and now they've offered it that a family member like your husband can also get a free degree, but the total number of degrees that your family can get at ACU through this benefit of online degrees is two. But it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It really is. It really impacted me because it changed the trajectory of my professional career because universities really value high degrees, And at that point, when I was in Abilene at the communication department, I was like, yeah, I don't really need that. I'm happy just teaching.
Hmm.
And when I got my doctorate, suddenly I had a whole new pathway of things I could go for.
Yeah. All of a sudden you had options that weren't there before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked you about going to school online for your doctorate is my next question I had for you had to do with the fact that you've done both as a student, you were in person, kind of traditional education back in
Hmm.
the 90s, like you said.
Uh-huh.
Then more
Don't do the
recently,
math there.
more recently doing the online stuff. So you've got that both of those experiences as a student, but you've also got both those experiences as a professor, right? You did
Hmm.
debate in person, community college,
Hmm.
professor at ECU, and now you're doing online. So not only have you had to make those transitions in real time, but now you're leading other people, these adjuncts that you lead, and I
Hmm.
guess students still too to like adjust to these challenges. So my question
Yeah.
is, what have you found to be most helpful, and what's still a challenge for you in delivering high quality instructions without the face to face interaction that used to be all over the place?
I can't quote the research, but the research basically says that if students are in relationship with somebody else in the course, and I'm not talking, marriage, I'm just talking friendship, there's
Right.
connections. If they have a connection with someone else in their course, they're much more likely to stay in the course and to do well.
Mm.
And that same research translates from face to face to online. And in my courses, I feel really bad for introverted students in my courses because I'm extroverted. And if I see you sitting at the back, I'm going to go over, I'm going to say hi, I'm going to connect. I'm going to try to put you in groups that you connect with people in the class.
Right.
And that really is probably comes from the Lord's given me a view of life that everybody's really valuable, that you
Hmm.
were made unique and that you are different. And the Lord decided to form you in your mother's womb. So in my online class, even though I can't tell if someone's introverted or not, I try to make sure that we overly communicate with all my students in my classes. Well, like for instance, I had a class a couple of terms ago, several months ago, that nobody was talking to me. I would reply to their discussion board posts. I would, put really nice comments in the discussion board. I'm sorry, in the assignment feedback, and nobody was talking to me. So I decided to email each one of them a personal message, like, hey, Tamika, I've noticed you've done a great job with your papers. Is there anything I can pray for you about? Da, 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 da. And I got a reply from one of my students. I got a reply from several, so I got my goal there. But one of them said, none of my professors of the last 3 years that I've been here has ever done that. And I don't say that I really don't say that to pub myself, but rather that connection is so important. So what you probably found, Justin, or at least this is my goal as I train adjuncts, is I try to give you different tips and tricks of how you can connect with students because
Hmm.
you may be the only person the student connects with in the course. And in online, it's so much harder to do in face to face. In face to face, I could read nonverbals. I could see if they walked out of class really quick at the very end or if they stopped and talked to somebody. Whereas online, I can look at the analytics and see how often they're in and out. But I try to make sure my adjuncts know that we've got to take advantage in our LMS, our learning management system. We've got to take advantage of every opportunity and ways of communicating with students because that connection is so
Hmm.
important. So, like I always talk about how in feedback, we can not only give written feedback in our online courses, we could make a video, a
Right.
screencast, or a personal video where they see my face. And in fact, if I give a student a really bad grade, I almost always do a video because I want them to see my face. I want them to hear my voice. I want them to, but it's the difference between me saying, I love you and I love you, right? And I can type that out, but you can't hear it unless you hear my nonverbals. So
Right.
if I have a problematic, struggling student, I'll do face to face. And that's the same for adjuncts or anybody else we're leading. I'm like, hey, let's meet via Zoom because we're finding that the written communication is struggling for us. And for some students, it's fine. I know when I was taking online courses, I was like, leave me alone, just let me get it done.
Hmm.
But some students need this kind of connection.
Yeah. So would you say that that's been not only what you found most helpful, but also the challenge too is the relationship aspect, like maintaining it and doing a good job with it?
Yeah, that is probably the main challenge is finding a way to connect with students. As you know, having taught, each student learns differently. So some need to see it. I'm one of those that needs to see it. Some need to do the kinesthetic and actually write or do something while some need to just hear it. My daughter was someone who just heard things. And so me figuring out how to connect with them via maybe one of those pathways is a challenge. And on online, it's a lot easier to ghost. We have students that just
Hmm.
don't engage. And eventually, after week 2, they give up. And so I'm fighting to connect with that student. But if they don't engage, I have no control over that.
Right. Yeah, I was just telling my wife this morning. I had have a student
Hmm.
whose paper they turn in papers, and I mean they were just really bad, and I didn't want to hurt their feelings, and so I
Yeah.
set up a Zoom meeting, and we zoomed for probably 45 minutes and talked through all this stuff,
Wow.
and then I
Yeah.
was telling her, I said, this is like the fruit of the labor is she resubmitted stuff, and it was so much better, and so
Oh,
you know
praise the
so
Lord.
to your point, the feedback and videoing and talk. We're also talking about the her family and her work and all this stuff
Hmm.
while we're zooming, which makes it not just
Hmm.
impersonal black and white text. Hey, you did a really
Yeah.
terrible job on this paper.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I'm really hard on students, I'm like, okay, got to realize that I'm trying to make sure that when you leave this course, that you are a better student. And so
Right.
my goal is for you to see the fruit of your labor and your work and your rewrites, that you see that fruit in the next course.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dr. Counts, one of the focuses of my podcast is on leadership. And it's a subject that I like, and I know it's a subject you're an expert in. You lead the department at ACU. So, just simple question: what's the best advice you would give to someone who's looking to improve their leadership? Not someone necessarily in education, but just somebody in the real world who says, "Man, I really need to work on my leadership and be a better leader." What would you tell
Humility.
them? Mm-hmm.
I think as I've gotten older and led more people, I've realized how much I don't know. And if you look biblically, at least my memory of what I've read in the Bible is the most successful leaders were submitting to the Lord. And when they didn't do well as a leader, they weren't submitting to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And in humility and submission, I think because the Lord is using you then in that way, then the Lord is directing and helping you be a leader. But if you go off in pride and do it, you're going to offend people. You're going to step on toes. You're going to make yourself be the God and not the Lord. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think humility is the best, and to be okay with failing, because every time you fail and mess up and do something wrong, you learn something. Now, I'll probably have to replay this podcast and listen to that line I just said because I can struggle with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, we live in Houston, right outside of Houston, and I
Um,
took my oldest daughter is a like a science. She's got a science brain, math and science brain.
oh wow!
So she enjoys going down there. So we went down there, and they have a theater, and they had just found this new documentary about the view from space, from the space station, and interviewing astronauts and all this stuff. And it was really awesome.
Hmm.
And we had just got done on the conversation about humility and how important it was and all that. Anyway,
Oh,
so we're leaving
hmm.
this theater. We're going back to the car. And she was like, Dad, I'm trying to remember exactly how she said it. It was something like, I don't know how anyone can be so prideful when you realize that you're just like a little speck on this, planet that is just one planet in the middle of this huge galaxy. And so that was some cool perspective
That is a great
from a
perspective. That's
14-year-old,
right.
on how can you not be humble?
Oh, that's awesome.
But
Well, it's what we do, I think, as humans, and this is part of how Satan manipulates us, but we just narrow our eyesight and become blind and think that only our world and what we have in our world is what's important. because it's the only thing we can control.
Right.
And we love control, so we control things. And it's not until the Lord shows us the broadness of what he is doing and the depth of what's going on. And that gives, like she said, we're not the only ones. We are on a team
Yeah,
here on this
exactly.
world.
Yep. And at least in my experience, the lessons to teach you humility are the toughest to go through, but the best teachers to kind of put you back in your place. So
Yes, they are.
good advice. Okay, so communication specific question, Dr. Count. So
Mm-hmm.
the question I love to ask everybody, because you mentioned don't be afraid of failing, is I like to ask people particularly about their failures instead of their successes, because
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody can identify with failure more than they can success. So can you tell us about a time when you would say you failed at communicating and what you learned from it? And how did that failure change your approach to communication, if at all, whether it was with a coworker, a student, or parenting or something?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things we say in the field of communication is it's impossible to over communicate. That, for instance, if you're in an organization and you're trying to lead an organization through something, you're probably going to tell them through an email. You're probably going to have a meeting about it. You're probably going to have a second meeting about it. Oh, and then you're going to have to touch base with everybody to make sure they understand about it. Because there's going to be places along the way that people go, oh, so you're saying this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized, I think in my marriage is where I've struggled to communicate the most. And it's so funny because Jim and I were both communication majors in college. So hilarious. So we're both pretty good with words. However, we're very different people. And what's helped me with Jim is that, well, I guess, there's some of that male stereotyping in that whenever I say something, he wants to help and fix it. And I'm like, no, I just want you to listen. But I've like many times said something and he took it one way and I meant it another way.
Right.
And I would say right now in my job, I'm doing more leadership growth than anything because we have a team of people, like my husband and myself, being very different people. Even though the Lord has made us one, we're very different people. So how do we become together as one? There's very different people that I work with. So there are people that work in marriage and family therapy, and they're always so great. They listen and they say, from my seat, I'm hearing this and this and this, right? And then I have some people that are science people, like your daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and they usually want the data and the information. Then I have people. I have a lady, and she and I always laugh with her because she's a lawyer, and she said, "So what did your contract say?" And I'm, yeah, I don't know. I kind of read over it and I forgot. So, because my personality that makes me come across a little bit lackadaisical,
Mm-hmm.
but I tend to work. I compare it to a mental file system. I tend to put things in the files that I need to remember, and it's at the front of the file if I need to pay attention to it, the back of the file if I don't.
Yep.
So, like I can very detailed go through things and find problems and say it doesn't connect here, but she's much more, here's follow the rules, do this. And I'm like, yeah, but did we ask this? So as a leader, learning how to communicate with all those people, and we had an academic council meeting this week and talking about a failure of leadership. And we come together every month and we talk about any new programs or changes to programs because the whole council has to approve it. And the council didn't go well because some people had not been told appropriately ahead of time about some of the things coming to council. And I would say that it is not part of my job to always warn people, but I need to also guide people that are coming to council saying, have you done this? Have you done this? Okay, usually, even though it's not written down, it's appropriate to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And this last time, I let someone have more that has more power than me in the organization convince me that they didn't need to do something. And because I let them come to council, it blew up.
Mm.
Now, everybody didn't say it was a failure afterwards, and they didn't blame me, but I knew I needed to follow my gut that we needed to do these things before we got to council. Some people needed to be informed and talked to about some of the things coming before council. And I didn't push it, and I should have pushed it. So That's one of the things I can personally struggle with is I could say my point of view, but if someone has another point of view and pushes hard enough, I can sometimes step back and go, oh, okay, I'm not going to have too much ego ownership in it,
Hmm.
and I need to follow my gut when the Holy Spirit is telling me, no, you need to do this. I need to follow that nudge.
Yeah. No, that's good. And my assumption is that everybody grows through life experiences that way. So one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
do that I enjoy, and it's just another tool like Clifton Strengths, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
SDI, so it's this assessment that tells you what kind of is your driving motivational force, whether it's you're motivated by the right processes or by caring for people or by performing
Mm-hmm.
well. Well, I'm motivated by performance. Just let's set a goal,
Okay.
let's go knock it out. So
Mm-hmm.
it was super helpful for me to go through that for self-awareness, but also it's like, okay, when you're
Yes.
talking to somebody like this, approach them like this, because if you communicate with them based on what they value, it's going to go much better for you than, just asking them, have they checked all the boxes of the task that you're giving them to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I just was doing some meeting note reports about the academic council meeting I was just talking about, and I was making a report to my dean who was not there. And I said, I think the main problem is people don't feel listened to. If
Yeah.
we would just spend time listening to people, not saying we have to agree, but just listening and seeking understanding, most of the time, if people feel like they're understood, they will take less on what's
Hmm.
being negotiated. And that's not something I came up with. That's something that's proven in research.
Right. Right. Well, the last question I had for you, Dr. Counts, was just going to let you tell a little bit about ACU. So I will freely admit my bias, but I think you're at one of the best schools and leading one of the best programs at the school.
Oh,
So
you're so sweet.
I was going to see if there's anything you'd like to tell folks who might be listening about ACU if they're maybe considering furthering or continuing education somewhere.
Sure. Well, Abilene Christian University, it started in the early 1900s and was initially associated with the Churches of Christ, but we have evolved now, or really as we have grown, we've attracted more students that are from lots of different denominations. And so we have a residential campus in Abilene, and that usually has 18 to 22-year-old students, but there are adults that go to school there because either they're at Dyes Air Force Base or they're working on a professional degree and they want to do face to face. But we also started ACU Online back in 2015. We started primarily with graduate degrees, so the marriage and family therapy. We also have a graduate degree in speech and or speech pathology. That's what it's called. We have a doctorate in EDD, in EDD and organizational leadership. And then we also have a doctor of nursing practice. They could go online to find out all the online degrees we have that are graduate level. But we also, in 2019, so right around the COVID epidemic, started several undergraduate degrees. And we have Bachelor of Science degrees in applied communication field. We also have one in leadership, healthcare administration, uh, let's see, I'm trying to think of all of them, health and human performance, with integrated studies degree where you could have classes on lots of different things. We have some business degrees, management, marketing, all of those kind of things. And for a student who wants to work or take care of their family and go to school at the same time, it's a great option because it's all online. But I would say that at both campuses, ACU Online and ACU Abilene, we practice in something we call the ACU difference. And, that's one of the reasons Justin and I hired you to work with us because I consistently say, and I'm not always right on this, but I consistently say I try to hire for people's hearts and I can teach you to be a teacher, but I
Hmm.
want people who care about students. And that's the ACU difference that as our students interact with our advisors or our recruiters or our professors, even if you're not a Christian, you're going to interact with the love of Christ is always our goal.
Hmm.
And that means that, when a student tells me the first week of class that they just recently found out they have breast cancer, then she and I get on together and we get to pray together. Or another student, I found out yesterday that their sister's house that was right next door to them burned and their sister's family is living with them.
Hmm.
Then ACU Online comes together and we help that family out. So it's really just a different place to be. And we're not always perfect, But my hope is that the Lord is always glorified in everything we do. And if he is glorified in everything we do, then people are going to see something different in us and be attracted to Jesus. So that's what we hope ACU does. Not everybody's perfect, but we try.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that's one of the things I've appreciated in particular about you and how you lead and the classes, that is an expectation, because that's not always true. Just because there's the word Christian is in the name doesn't necessarily mean that that's a goal or kind of freedom as you interact with students.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Counts, thanks for your time. And you're a blessing to me personally, and I know to the students you teach and the other adjuncts you lead. And so I appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing some wisdom and insight with us.
Well, thank you. I don't know how much wisdom it is, but I think sometimes we all just need to know that we're all struggling to be leaders, and we're just doing the best we can, and give grace to each other, and lean on the Lord to help teach us.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. The Leading Lounge is brought to you by Communicate to Care, where we are building better leaders by building better people. For more information, visit us online at www.communicatecare.com. This is your host, Dr. Justin Dubose, and we'll see you next time, right here in the Leading Lounge.